Opening lecture of the second day is by Dr. Manoj Matthews. Let me introduce the speaker to the audience. As I mentioned yesterday, most of the speakers are proud alumni of the Department of Chemistry. Even Dr. Manoj Matthews was a student of this department. He obtained his MSc in Chemistry in the year 2001 from our department. Then during 2003 to 2005, he was in Liquid Crystal Research Center, Bangalore. He was working for his PhD on liquid crystals with Dr. Yellamgad. After his PhD from that center, he moved to IISc, Bangalore as research associate during 2005-2006. During 2006 to 8, he was a postdoctoral fellow at Japan, working again on liquid crystals research. In the year 2008 to 10, he moved to USA on Samsung postdoctoral research fellowship. So he has vast experience of working on liquid crystals, not only in India but also in 2 different countries. His PDF is in the field of nanotechnology and also in liquid crystals. Right now, Dr. Manoj is working as an associate professor at St. Joseph College, Calicut. St. Joseph's College, Devagiri, Calicut.
Okay, now let me come back. So she introduced me as a maybe a researcher. That's what you felt, but I would like to be called as a teacher rather than a researcher. Because right now I teach students, my degree and PG students. So I chose that profession by passion. So maybe you heard, yesterday you had a good session on some very enlightening talks. How was it? Did you enjoy it? So you must be having some, what is going on in the world of research and how you can relate it to the latest research that's going on around. Now today I am going to talk to you about molecular self-assembly as a tool to advance functional materials. Have you heard about molecular self-assembly? The term self-assembly? Yeah, that's a very interesting word and it's a lot of research going on in this area. Now, my intention here is actually to give you some idea or make yourself aware that whatever things you study in your degree and postgraduate syllabus is what exactly used in research. I want to give you that connection. Many times the talks like this, you will actually be missing out. You don't know what's going on here. Okay, I heard a lot of things about this, but how am I related to this? Because I don't study these things, I don't know where my knowledge, current knowledge stands and how can I relate my present knowledge to these subjects. So here my attempt will be to give you a connection with the latest research that's going on with the knowledge that you have. How can you relate and motivate you to take up research and do some advanced studies in these areas. Okay, I will be just trying to explain these 2 terms, that's all. What's molecular self-assembly and what does it mean by advanced materials? Let's move on. I tried, this is the shortest way I can put my contents. What is self-assembly? How self-assembly works? Characteristics of self-assembly, driving forces of self-assembly, and then some functional materials. Using self-assembly, you can get these functional materials. Okay, let's move on. Before coming and introducing the term self-assembly, I would like to know how do we make things. It's after all we are going to try to make some complex things using self-assembly as a tool. Now what that we need to know, how do we make things? We make things by different ways. Let's try it. If you want to generate a sculpture, how do we do this? We just carve it out from a stone, right? We carve it out. There is another way of making things. How is that? Take brick, you build it up one by one. You get into a building structure. So each part is carefully made to place one over the other and you try to build the monument what you want to make. So these 2 approaches are, in other ways, it's called top-down approach. The first method is called carving out things, is called the top-down approach, and The other method is called bottom-up approach. You are building things from the bottom up, making one by one, place out one over the other. And the top-down method, you carve out things. These are the two ways basically we make things, whether it is any building structures or even in chemistry we make molecules and things by using this method. Now let us go further. We make things at different scales. See, for example, you have highways which is in kilometer scale. You have automobile parts and machineries, it's meter to millimeter scale. And also further miniaturization, you can see small molecules, computers, chips, all these are the things we make in different dimensions. Now there are different methods are applied to make these things. The first few cases you can see, this fabrication by hand or by machine, that's what we do. But once you come down or scale down the dimension, you need to go for photolithography or electron beams or STM techniques are used. That's nothing but you are carving out things, you are using these advanced technologies by lithography or scanning tunneling microscopy. What you do, you are going to get at the micrometer scale components. So that is another way of all these are actually, you are basically what you are doing is carving out method. That is nothing but a top-down approach. Now there is another way, you can see synthesizing molecules. How do we synthesize molecules? By making bonds and breaking bonds. Each atom is connected to the next. That's what you do in your synthesis, molecular synthesis or organic synthesis. Now where does the self-assembly play a role? Self-assembly come into as a handy tool when you, self-assembly comes as a handy tool when you try things working at the micrometer to nanometer scale. So there where what you do, the system should be mobile. Then you can apply the principles of self-assembly. Now let's come, before going to the self-assembly part, you know how we make organic molecules are made. This is a very simple molecule. Just I'll come to why I made this molecule later in my talk. Now this, how do we make this? It's very simple organic synthesis. Right? We break this molecule into acid, phenol and again a phenolic compound. You try to get this compound. So this is the research that you know. This is actually a patented molecule. And now you can see these molecules are made in a very simple chemistry, using the simple chemistry that you have learned in your classrooms or even in your practical lab. Let's try, how do we get this acid? Usually what is the process? It is by the same chemistry that you have learned. What is this reaction? It's a Biddle-Crafts reaction. Acylation. What is this? It's emulsification reduction. Again, acylation followed by what is this reaction? Ester and ketones are converted to the carboxylic acid. This reaction is known as very good haloform reaction. So you get your target molecule here, at least this. Right. I'm sure Bhaja Pujari sir is doing a very good job over because he was the one who took us over these classes and I don't know if you are enjoying that class, so I am sure that you are also, maybe you are much better students because I am not sure whether I could answer that when I was a student here, but you are doing a very good job. Maybe they are doing a very good job transferring this information very well to you. Okay, now we have to synthesize this compound. Again, it is the same techniques that you can use. Your starting material is different, you reduce it, you make it ester, then reduce that nitro group to amino group, and then amino is converted to the phenolic compound using the diazotization reaction. All these reactions you are very familiar. Again, now how do we go for the total synthesis of that molecule? Just, this is a DCC coupling reaction. Again you get this compound, coupling with the other compound you get the target molecule. So even at this stage, the very so-called advanced materials, you need to know the basics first. You need to know, you should be a molecular engineer to design this molecule and then propose a mechanism or method to synthesize these compounds. So this is a very simple classical reaction that you are used, which you are studying in your MSc. Now let's move on to the next step. So in organic molecular synthesis or using molecules are built one by one atom by atom. That's how we do the synthesis. Now let us come, once you make the molecules, now you have that molecule, but what will you do? How the association of those molecules, how are they going to play a role? That's what I am going to show you next. You need step by step, one by one, attachment of different atoms to get that molecule. Now let us see something else. In self-assembly provides our opportunity at this dimensions, at the micrometer to nanometer scale. Now let's go and say what is self-assembly. Look at this. You have atoms. You are constructing that atoms, building molecules using those atoms and the known reactions. Say for example, this is a phospholipid molecule. Right? You are familiar with that molecule. It has a polar head group and a non-polar tail. That you are all familiar with that. Now let us say what happens to this molecule if it is allowed to self-assemble. Okay? Let's see. This is a very simple, all of you have studied about this fluid mosaic model of your cell membranes. Right? Now you see this molecule, these molecules are the ones which is assembled here. Can you see that? It's a polar group and a non-polar tail. So organized in this fashion. But how did you synthesize or get this molecule? This is nothing but by the process of self-assembly. That is, molecules are allowed to form into a super molecules. But the most important part here is, these super molecules are synthesized by non-covalent interactions. It is no longer the covalent bond that is make these molecules are held together. It's by non-covalent interactions. Instead, in the earlier case we discussed, we had each atom by atom we were doing it by the covalent bonding. But here you see a complex structure is being synthesized using non-covalent interactions. There is no longer you have any covalent bonding. This is the power of self-assembly. You can get super molecules from molecules using non-covalent interactions. That is simply what is self-assembly. Okay. Now not only a bilayer structure. You see these structures are very dynamic. You allow them to assemble, you can get vesicles and liposomes or bilayer structures. It's all from the same starting material. That's your amphiphilic molecule with a polar head group and a tail. Now how are you going to get these complex structures? It's by simply changing the concentration of the molecules and the solvents. So you put them, they have the power to assemble themselves. That's what is self-assembly into very complicated structures. So that's what you see here. It's liposomes and micelles all getting from our bilayer structure, all these complicated structures. Can you imagine if we start building this molecule one by one? No, it is impossible. Making them one by one, like we constructed a building using the bottom-up approach. That's not possible here by covalent synthesis. But the bottom-up approach here, what we are going to apply is by self-assembled process. Now, what are self-assembly? What are the factors that drive self-assembly of phospholipids? It's simply the hydrophobic interactions that you have seen. The hydrophobic interactions that are the primary forces here, and there was a hydrophobic and hydrophilic van der Waals electrostatic interactions between the polar head groups and the non-polar parts of the molecule. So they interact themselves and you get those complex structures. Basically, just remember, it is self-assembly is controlled by non-covalent interactions. Non-covalent interactions. Okay. Now let me define self-assembly. Self-assembly is a process in which molecules or parts of molecules spontaneously form ordered aggregates, usually by non-covalent interactions. So the spontaneous formation of complex molecular structures using the non-covalent interactions. You just remember the spontaneous individual components and they are getting into an ordered structure. That's what is self-assembly. I am asked to give some questions at the end of the session, so please note the points that I am stressing. You should keep a watch on, okay? So, what are the characteristics of self-assembly? It's spontaneous, I said. The moment you give the ideal conditions, it can self-assemble into a complex structure spontaneously. Then, that increases the organization, the complexity of the structure. Then they become a supermolecules or supramolecules, supramolecular structure. And then you can see they are dynamic. Dynamic because you can change the complexity or the organization of the molecules by changing the concentration, temperature and other external parameters, the type of the solvent, whether it is polar, non-polar, etc. And that is the key to nanotechnology or advanced functional materials. Okay? So the characteristics are, these are very spontaneous we are getting a complex ordered structures, and we can actually, they are dynamic. That is very important. Dynamic, it is reversible. Once you can make complex thing, and you can also dissociate them into a separate individual components and reuse them for different purposes or making it other complex materials. So these are the characteristics. Now let me talk about the driving forces of self-assembly. What drives self-assembly? What makes these complex structures possible? You have capillary forces, electrostatic forces, that's nothing but the positive and the negative part of the molecule, or positive dipoles and negative dipoles, van der Waals interactions, hydrophobic and hydrophilic interactions, then you have hydrogen bonds, coordination bonds, pi-pi stacking interactions. These are the tools by which we can control the self-assembly process. That is nothing but all these are characteristically very weak bonds. When you compare your ionic bond or even a covalent bond, the energy that is associated with that covalent bond, and when you compare with these forces, these are much less strong. I mean, the strength of these bonds are very weak. That is why we can control it by very easily, even by changing very weak external parameters. They are responding to external stimuli like temperature variation, pressure variation, light, or pH. All these changes will make these changes in their weak bonding, and thereby the self-assembled structures are created. So that is the idea here. So these are some of the driving forces of self-assembly. You are very familiar with these things. Let me tell you, see, for example, DNA. Why do we have a double helical structure of the DNA? Why do we have? Because of the base pairing, you are very familiar. Adenine always thymine and guanine associate with cytosine. That's why hydrogen bonding, you look at this. So these hydrogen bondings on each strand of the DNA is making them a double helical structure. You make them, you break these weak hydrogen bonds, then you get a single stranded DNA. So the DNA is one of the best examples you can think of as a self-assembled supermolecular self-assembled structure. Here hydrogen bonded carboxylic acids, you see carboxylic acid is always associated in pairs because of the hydrogen bonding. Though we call hydrogen bonding as weak, it is a very, very powerful method or a tool to generate complex structures. You know, it's not that simple. You make some hydrogen bonding structures in the molecule and put it in a water or allow them to assemble, it does wonders. That's why you can get very, very complex structures. So the classical example for hydrogen bonding as a self-assembly, as a driving force, as a tool for driving this complexity in structures is the example is your DNA, which is you are very familiar with. Then pi-pi stack. You have an aromatic ring which is rich in electrons, pi electrons, another ring will stack on that. You can see layers are formed. The graphene, why it is very slippery? Because of one layer is formed over the other, you can get actually a pi-pi interaction. So one aromatic ring can place or assembled on top of another aromatic ring, and thereby you can get actually a pile of structures like pile of coins, which is nowadays, and one aromatic ring is allowed to sit on the other aromatic, then another aromatic ring, and then that's nothing but a pile of coins that's acting as a conducting wire nowadays. It is used as a conducting wire, molecular wire. So pi-pi stacking is also another very useful interaction, a very useful non-covalent interaction that is used in making these complex structures or self-assembled structures. Now van der Waals forces, that's nothing but it includes many different types of molecular interactions. Van der Waals forces like dipole interactions, induced dipole, you have a ketone group in the molecule, another ketone, it can have different types of associations, whether head-on, tail-on, head-to-tail, or these different kinds of associations are possible. So van der Waals forces, you just look at this, it's just the energy of this is just less than 5 kilojoules per mole. It's a very weak bond but very powerful, very directional. It drives the molecules to assemble in a specific fashion. Another example could be, okay, maybe it's time for question answer session, because I told you basically I am a teacher, so I have I have a habit of asking questions. Maybe scientists and industrial people, they don't care much about this. So, but I care. So you have to answer, otherwise you can be ready for the what? Imposition But that's the old style. What I do nowadays, I ask questions. If the students don't say, I send them directly to the library. Get the answer and come back. That's a new technique that I use. Imposition is not longer working. That's the old technique. Innovative way of teaching. Send them directly to the library. They have to get that answer, come back at least, and they have to note the reference from where they got. So that's a new way. So maybe I should try that. Okay. But so far, from the contents we have discussed all these things. What is self-assembly, right? What is self-assembly? Is the spontaneous organization of molecules into very complex structures. Very good. How self-assembly works? Based on non-covalent interaction? Yeah, right. Like using the non-covalent, very weak bonding, and what are the characteristics? They are spontaneous, they are dynamic, and you can increase the complexity using all these things. So we are very familiar. What are now these driving forces are nothing but our tools. Okay? These driving forces are the tools for you to make complex things. You want certain molecules to be associated into a complex structure. You design a molecule where you have these hydrogen bonding sites, where you have these ionic dipoles, and now you are using these tools to design molecules of very complex structure. Okay, so it is your imagination how it's going to assemble when you put two carboxylic acid groups in a molecule at different places and try how they are going to organize. And accordingly you can induce dipoles, van der Waals forces, capillary forces, the hydrogen bonding sites in a molecule, so that you get complex structure in a designed fashion. When you do that, you end up in getting functional molecules. Okay, now the question is, what are functional molecules? What are functional molecules? A molecule with a specific task or a function, right? That's called functional molecule. You have to get the expected result of course. Now let me discuss the birth of this functional molecules in other way. You read in journal articles like advanced material, functional material, smart material, intelligent material. All these are the same, almost. We hear a lot of buzz about this word. When I was a student here, we never heard this kind of funny, very attractive terms. Okay, we are not exposed to this kind of things. Now, why is it so important nowadays? You hear a lot of nanotechnology, all these kinds, because it's very simple. You get into the nature, look at this nature, colors, it's wonderful, right? Again, shells of these are inspiration for making. See, the colors, when you analyze the structure of these coloring materials, we find that these are nothing but photonic crystals, responsible for this kind of structural colors. Okay. Now you also try low temperature ceramics are actually the driving force is nothing but the shells of these things. You look at this gecko, that like what do you call that? The spiders under which goes on stick onto this geckos like going climbing on the wall. Yeah, it's a type, and you see they are very powerful. You can just stick and it's actually so powerful that you cannot pull something down. It has such an adhesion onto the surface. People are always interested to know what is happening here, why it is so, what are the properties associated with this. Now this curiosity and analysis actually had led to this advanced and functional material. But this was possible only in this era. Maybe later after the 1990s and late 2000s. Why 2000 in the year 2000? Because we are blessed with the technology. You can go deep into the structures and study and analyze and then mimic these structures into the real advanced materials. What I mean is this. And also you see lotus effect. It's nothing like it's water repelling. So you can think of making surfaces which are self-cleaning surfaces, or even which doesn't attract water molecules, it doesn't wet. So these ideas for making materials of different colors like photonic crystals or low temperature ceramics, bioadhesions, and also the self-cleaning surfaces, all these are advanced materials. You got the idea to generate these materials, advanced functional materials, looking into the nature. Just looking into the nature, you don't get any idea. But what you have to do, you have to study, go and analyze the structure. That is possible because you look at this Geico feet. Say for example, you try to magnify the feet. What's happening here? This is at 1 centimeter scale. This is how it looks like. The resolution at 1 centimeter. Go further into the nanometer or micrometer scales. You see what is happening there? See? These are nothing but you have that hook which is placed on a glass or a very smooth surface. Put it and vacuum, seal it. It's very strong, right? See how many such structures are there here? Maybe millions. You can imagine the collective force it has on its wall. Now, the latest technology allows us to study these structures in detail and then you realize why it is so. Now you can make these things artificially. You can synthesize or manufacture using the self-assembly process. That is how we got the ideas for getting self-assembled structures and the functional material. See, look at the structural color. You enlarge it and find out what is happening there. You can see some crystals are arranged in a specific pattern so that only one wavelength of or particular wavelength of light is allowed to pass through that system of array of crystals, which is called photonic crystals. And that arrangement, particular arrangement of these crystal molecules of photonic crystals is making them these structural colors. Now you make such molecules and try to arrange in a specific way, you will also end up in getting this kind of structures. Similarly, of course, the lotus effect also I have shown you. The water repelling surfaces, you try to mimic it, it becomes an advanced material, you apply it wherever you want. Now, all this has been possible only because we had a powerful techniques to analyze different things. So, chemical analysis is the key to all these things. What are chemical analysis? You are familiar with qualitative analysis, quantitative analysis, structural analysis, surface analysis. Can you name some techniques or the techniques you will use for qualitative analysis? Volumetry, then gravimetry. Gravimetry is a quantitative analysis technique, right? Then structural analysis, what do you use? Spectroscopic techniques are used for structural. And how about the surface analysis? You use microscopic techniques. It's very simple. All the basics that you are studying here are used in advanced research. You should be thoroughly knowing what are happening with here. So let me just quickly, chemical analysis you are familiar with. Quantitative analysis you are familiar, how much content is present, you are doing that. Even using your gravimetric technique is one of the techniques. Structural analysis and surface analysis you are doing the smoothness of the surface, roughness of the surface, how smooth or what are the different dimensions of the surfaces can be analyzed. The different techniques that we use are analysis through spectroscopy, chromatography, thermal energy, X-ray techniques, microscopy, electrochemical techniques and some other techniques. Look into this. As an MSc students or undergraduate students, you are exposed to all these techniques, right? Without this, you cannot do any research or any advancement in any of the advanced researches that's going on here. These are the fundamental things that you should be knowing. Why I am stressing on this point? Most of the time, when I was a student, I always had this difficulty relating why the hell I am studying all these things, where it is used. That was a big question for me. Maybe some of you at least have that question. Is it used anywhere? Always they are telling so many things, you are studying this, where it is used? Okay, so that's why I am stressing on this point. The simple NMR is not a very simple thing. Right? The melting point is simple. That is one of the, I'll tell you later, how carefully looking at the melting point has actually led to the birth of a multi-billion-dollar industry. The observation of looking at just the melting point. Even now that has a very significance, looking at the melting point, very simple characteristic techniques. We always curse the teacher when they ask you to take the melting point. You have to take that small capillary, this thing and this into it, and never you get that because your material will be always some impurity. It doesn't go in, part is melted, the other part is staying as a record. Now, what we used to do to write melting point in our practicals, I had a great help from one of the faculty members sitting here. I don't name. So that's how we at least escape that melting point test. Okay. Now we will do chromatography. Thermal energy is a tool. Can you tell some techniques which you use for thermal analysis? Okay, melting point is one, but it's more advanced. Yeah, you use your DST, TG, all these things are used, right? X-ray, of course, you know. X-ray, XRD, you are studying from your, maybe from your plus 1, plus 2 level, you are studying about that Bragg equation, right? And lambda is equal to? More than that, we don't know why it is used, why you have to study. Simply 2 more lines and just always do some equation calculation. We don't know where it is applied. That is one of the very useful, most useful equations that you will come across in your basic researches. I don't need to mention about spectroscopy. All the techniques, don't forget any one. You need everything. Everything, right from NMR, mass. Mass is not a spectroscopic technique, it is a spectrometric. UV, CD, IR, all these are very much necessary. Now let us talk about, I don't want to go in here in detail. Again, spectroscopy again further divided into molecular level. When you want to study the molecules, you have UV, IR, NMR and things like that you might have studied. Atomic level, you have AS, spectroscopy looking at the study of atoms, AES, AFS, plasma and electron, emission spectroscopy. All these techniques are used to study and analyze these complex structures. Okay? I just rush out this part. I don't want to spend much time in here. XRD, microscopy. This is very important because this is actually allowed us to look into structures. It was only possible from the late 90s. You can look into structures, you can microscopic analysis, go deep into the structures at the nanometer scale resolution. That has actually revolutionized the study and research on functional materials. Using TEM, SEM, SPM, AFM, I am sure you are all studying the basics of these instrumentation techniques in your MS, right? Unfortunately, you may not be having the hands-on experience about this. You have. Okay. Okay, so you should definitely do your research project. Try make a sample. Simply put your finger or take your nail and put it under the surface and see at the 1 nanometer scale resolution what's going to happen. Okay, so you are lucky to have such advanced instrumentations to study the surfaces. Actually, all this has actually led to the birth of functional materials. These are again, you need polarigraphy, electrophoresis, CHN, polarimetry, mass spectrometry, all these are you are studying the basics or fundamentals of these things in your MSc classes and these are used in advanced research. Okay. Now let me go to functional materials. I have just chosen only few because this is based on the Calicut University syllabus. These are included in their MSc syllabus, so I just picked only few. I could not find a syllabus of this university here. Somewhere I just searched in the internet, the department website, somehow I could not get in the university, where I could not locate at least where the syllabus is uploaded. So I just retained those things which were there. I am sure you are also studying advanced functional materials or supramolecular chemistry and studying some of these subjects. Have you studied any of this? You are studying? Liquid crystals, you are studying them? Catalysts? Yeah, so very good, no problem. So these are all advanced materials, you are familiar with these things. Okay, now I go to my favorite liquid crystals because this was my PhD area. I worked on my doctoral, postdoctoral research considerably in this area. So let me start with that. I will go into if time permits, I will go into the other structures also. Very quick. Oh, time is going on. Okay, liquid crystals. These are functional materials by self-assembly of molecule. So now we are coming to the self-assembly applied into a functional material. Self-assembling tools or characteristics are making molecules to assemble into liquid crystalline state. For example, why we have to study liquid crystals or any topic? I may say liquid crystals is like this because I am studying in this area or I am working. No, not because of that. Any field, if you want to say, whatever you said this is an advance, is very interesting. Most of the times when I say very interesting, it is interesting to you, not to the others. So that always that is there. But here, why I am telling this, you can look at the applications. I don't think any one of you is sitting, not I don't think, I am sure, none of you sitting, most of you sitting here have used the liquid crystal, and liquid crystal device was your first gadget. Your first gadget that you use is a liquid crystal device. The most used gadget is also a liquid crystal device. Which is your first used gadget, not your iPhone and things like that. Just look into childhood days. Calculator you use, right? Simple, that's it. Calculator or your wristwatch, this works on a liquid crystal material. Okay. And that has been explored into different display technology, information, nanotechnology, environment, energy, medical applications and life science. It has a wide range of applications. It is actually a multi-billion-dollar industry. Now what is this? What are liquid crystals? So why it is important, you know. It has a lot of applications related to your day-to-day life. Let me cover this, at least some of these basic things about liquid crystals you are studying, so I can just rush off here. You are familiar with the three states of matter: solid, liquid and gas. Why it is organized into these three states? Very simply, what is the reason? What made you to classify materials into these three states? This is the material property, right? If I put it another way, the ordering of the molecules in each state is different, right? Liquid crystals are nothing but an intermediate state between that of liquid and solid. It's a meso phase in between solid and liquid. So some properties of solid and some properties of liquid. Now let me tell you what are these. Normally what happens when you heat a solid to a liquid, when you apply temperature to solid, it will go to the liquid state. There the ordering is different. You see, in crystals or solids have a three-dimensional arrangement of molecules. One molecule is organized very well with the other in a three-dimensional structure, and that has orientational order. Orientation, I mean all are pointing in one direction. And also they have positional order. It's a three-dimensional structure, you know, molecular crystal structures are very regular structures, and they have each molecule also placed at each interval with specific distances with respect to what you are studying, different crystal structures, FCC, BCC, right? Okay, good. And they don't flow. But crystals are actually birefringent. Birefringent, they are shiny. These are some of the very basic properties that you associate. But when you come to liquid, as you can see, the random motion, they have no order, no orientation order, no positional order, they flow. They are fluid in nature. But it is also not birefringent. There is no color, there is no shiny. But when you talk about liquid crystal phase, which is an intermediate between these two, what I mean is this. It has some ordering of the crystals, but they flow like liquid. So it is nothing but a shining liquid. Shining, flowing liquids. So they have order, but they have only positional order in one dimension, not in three dimensions. They have orientation order. You see, they are oriented in one direction, not randomly like this. But they flow like liquid, but they are shiny. So intermediate state between liquids and crystals are called liquid crystalline state. At least you know that, right? It's a meso phase. It's a phase in between the solid and liquid. This is why we are looking at this structure. The liquid crystal displays, you are all familiar with the different types of laptops, your wristwatches. All these are very convenient because they consume much less energy, and also they have more lifetime. Now there are another application is actually a thermal sensor. Look at these structures. These are simply just two simple plastic sheet. Very thin plastic sheet. In between you have a liquid crystalline material, and that display different colors based on the temperature. So they are used as a thermal sensor. Okay. This is a strip. You can put it on the. You can measure what is the degree of. Whether you are suffering from fever, the temperature is abnormally high. But to 0.1 degrees accuracy you can measure looking at the different color changes. So simple plastic strip. You tear it off with very thin sheets, and in between you have a liquid crystal. No electronic circuits at all to display this color. That's the advantage. So they are finding applications as thermal sensors or mood sensors. Now there are also interesting materials like your lipsticks with the liquid crystalline material, which can change color depending on the temperature. Interesting, right? Huh? Don't you think so? And you have a mood ring. Depending on why it is called mood ring, because the moment you change your mood, temperature will vary. Well, minute, whether you are very romantic, angry, in between, your temperature, body temperature will be different. It's very convenient if you girls can wear such a kind of things. At least boys can know when the right time to approach you, which mood you are in, so that they can. So you should try. Otherwise, the so-called boyfriends are there here. You try giving this, and once they get it, you can somehow monitor their mood, and then you can approach and go. Okay. So you want to get a liquid crystalline material for that. So the idea here is you change the temperature. When a minute change in temperature will trigger this color change. I will tell you later why this color change is associated with the temperature. Now look at this. This is a conference hall. This photograph is actually from Kent State University, where I did my postdoc. They have a conference hall. Here you see, this is the wall. Usually what we do, see these are our curtains. We don't want others to see, or we don't want to see outside. But here this is a glass sheet where liquid crystal materials are inside. Whenever you want to make it transparent, you put a switch on. It will become transparent. Otherwise, you switch it off, it becomes an opaque material. Inside you have a liquid crystalline material. You can elaborate into a bathroom also if you want to, or bathtub. You want to look at nature and do a bath, you can do that, but only problem sometimes you will see the nature also will see you. But there are glasses, but there is a possibility, but that is how if you do the normal. But use liquid crystal materials, there are some associated particles where others can't see inside, but still you can very nicely work out. Power, just what's the battery? Power use. That's what current is not needed. You just need much less power. See, your calculator is working not on a power supply. You are doing it with very simple batteries. That is one of the advantages here. It consumes much less power. You can operate these windows in a simple like this with your normal batteries can be used. Yeah, that's what. So it's affordable. It is not. It doesn't require that much of power for these devices to work. Okay. Now the question is, how do we develop these things? You can look at this. You need chemistry people. These materials are simple organic molecules or coordination complexes. You need chemistry people to synthesize. But that's not enough. You need to know the fundamental laws and octates and things like that, because you need to have very thorough knowledge in physics and also biology and engineering. People are needed to make it a fabricated device. You need also very much the fundamental to all this is mathematics. So you need to be basically a material scientist for making these things. You cannot call yourself, I am good in organic chemistry, so I am here. That's what at least we did some mistake. We never studied the physical chemistry part, or sorry to Ishwar sir is not here. The irony is, these Nernst equations and all those things we never bothered to study in the class. Later on I was put to a hell in my research, and I need to study all those electrochemistry parts of construct some cells and my photovoltaic devices. I had to go through that. So, none of these things can be ignored. You need to have a thorough knowledge on all these things. At least thorough in the sense, at least you will develop your own interest when the requirement comes. So you don't ignore any of these subjects, you need everything. Basic. So I see here industrial chemistry, some of them are into medicinal chemistry, some are into general chemistry, organic chemistry. No, you need everything. Without industry, what is the use of organic chemistry? Without organic chemistry, where is the material science? So it's all interrelated. You need all the knowledge in all different subjects. Okay. This is what I wanted to tell you. See, the birth of liquid crystals in 1888. What he did? He used to characterize this cholesterol benzoate molecule. The earlier method in 1888, the method of characterizing this technique was taking the melting point was the best method. There was no spectroscopic technique, no X-ray. The way to characterize is only simple melting point. He took the melting, he was taking the melting point and characterizing this material. He was a botanist. Characterizing this cholesterol benzoate. Look at this. flat solid structure, it is melting, it is getting a clear liquid. But intermediate, there is always a cloudy liquid in between. Okay? So he was puzzled, why this is a double melting phenomenon? It's not clearly going into a liquid state. He was very interested, always, however pure the material is, always he is observing at this. First it starts melting at 145.5 and is going at 78.5, you are getting a clear liquid. And he was very interested in this, he sent the sample to a crystallographer, Otto Lehmann. He was looking at these structures under the microscope. Then, by his analysis, he found that actually this is not a solid or even a pure liquid, but it's an intermediate state, like flowing liquids or shining crystals, which is flowing. So that is the birth of liquid crystal molecules. Now you might be thinking, some of you, when you take the melting point, you have also observed this, right? But that would be most probably due to your sample is not dry. You already have some liquid water in it, so one part melt, or the other melt is your sample is not pure. Different compounds melting at different things. Some part, one material will melt at 100 degrees, the other material still retain that. So should be careful when you make analysis, but it's good that you observe. Your observation, even in a very small scale experiments, is very, very important. Okay? So this is the cyanobiphenyl molecule, which is actually used in every display device, even today. So basically, it is actually, it's a crystal structure at 21 degree. Go to a nickel crystalline phase. Further heating it go to nematic. Further heating it go to isotope. These are the nickel crystalline phases. These are the nickel crystalline phases you have here. Now, you look at the molecular orientations. Ordering. Crystal, it is very ordered. Smelting is still retained. You can see that layer arrangement of structures. Nematic phase, the ordering has increased, and finally, at the liquid state, it has very become random. So, on heating, you are periodically changing the ordering in the molecule. Intermolecule, see, each of these are actually each cyanobiphenyls, each molecule. One molecule is associated with the other molecule not by covalent bonding, but by non-covalent interaction or by self-assembly. The heating temperature is changing the self-assembly characteristic, you are ending up in different phases. All these phases have different applications in technology. You are using a twisted pneumatic display, you need this pneumatic phase. Of course, this is not the pure material that is used, it is used in combination with different liquid crystal materials to make the ideal mixture that is used in nowadays in display. It's not exactly the single molecular structure. Now, my point here is, you are varying the self-assembly or intermolecular associations by increasing the temperature, and that intermolecular association is driving you with the different phases. Each phase has different characteristics, and that characteristics are exploited in the device applications. Now let's go to the next. There are not only one phase, you have different types of phases, almost 50 different types of phases are there based on their orientation, like pneumatics, smeltic. See, here you can see no ordering here, there is layered ordering is here. Smeltic C is actually a filtered phase. Now, not only rod-shaped molecule like which we call as calamatic liquid crystals, we also have something like discotic, which is a disc-shaped molecule giving liquid crystalline phases. You have bent core molecules giving liquid crystalline phases. So, different phases are giving different applications for the materials. You can design different molecules. Now there are thousands of molecules are made every day to find out liquid crystalline properties and associated display applications. Again, not only by heating, you can also get liquid crystalline phases by putting it in a solvent like lyotropic liquid crystals. Your cell wall, your cell body is actually in liquid crystalline state. Cell wall, the phospholipids layer, bilayer, what we talked about, is actually in a liquid crystalline state. So they are called lyotropic liquid crystals and thermotropic liquid crystals. See, look at here. So soap solution is actually the best example of lyotropic liquid crystal. You can see soaps are shining, right? Look into it. You have some light coming out. I mean, shines like this thing. So this is an example where you have amphiphilic molecules organizing in different way based on the different concentrations. You can get self-assembled structures or liquid crystalline structures. So classification of liquid crystals you have studied, basically based on the type of liquid crystalline phase, you can classify them. Based on how they are formed, whether by application of heat or by solvent action, you can name as thermotropic or lyotropic, and you can also get molecular structure, calamatic, discotic and bent core. Now let me go to something else. how do we control these phases? I want to design a material which gives only nematic phase. How do we do that? You have the self-assembly tools like molecular shape anisotropy of the molecule, symmetry, microphase segregation, self-assembly and self-organization. These are the tools that we use for designing functional materials or functional liquid molecules. Meaning, see here, these are shape anisotropy. I am just rushing up here. See here, for example, microphase segregation. Your molecule has an aromatic ring and also aliphatic tails. So aromatic rings have a tendency to organize them in the pi-pi interaction. They all form together. And your alkylic chain or polar groups will assemble. So there is a microphase segregation. Depending on the self-assembly, they segregate into different areas and overall they form a molecular structure. So basically what I mean to say here is, the individual molecule may be having some property, but when it comes into a bulk association or in a self-assembled structure, the property of the molecule is entirely different. That's what pointed here. So self-assembly and self-organization is leading to the different functional molecules or functional phases. Okay, how do we identify these things? It's by polarizing optical microscopy, differential scanning calorimetry, mechanical susceptibility, X-ray diffraction, and electro-optic studies can be used to characterize these phases. Polarizing optical microscopy, what we do is simply take the material, electrocrystalline material, put it in a tube glass plate and heat it and look it under the polarized optical microscope. You see different textures which is characteristic of each phase. See, look at this color formations in the electrocrystalline phases. So very interesting, right? Have you seen such nice designs anywhere? Maybe think of getting a churidar or sari with this kind of combination. So if you are, any one of you are going to industry for making material fabrics, you should contact us. We can give you some of the best designs that's available, where we have thousands of pictures with very different color combinations, and you will be attracted to that. So these textures are characteristic of a particular phase. You can see that if you have a particular texture, say for example this phase is a very characteristic of a symmetric A phase, and that phase can be used for a particular application. This is how DSC, you are all studying this principle of DSC, the instrumentation technique and things like that. Take the sample, heat it, crystal will take up the energy and melt, and finally it will go to isotropic. That means there is some phase here. The heat is not used, and cool it, it will give away that energy and you get a endothermic peak. So that indicates DSC is a powerful technique used for phase transitions associated with temperature change in a material. X-ray, I told you earlier about our Bragg equation. You get these phase structures and you can see different layer ordering, how one electrocrystalline layer to the other, what is the distance, how the molecules are arranged, how complex is the layer structure, all these by simple XRD techniques. So, let me skip. Okay, why are we interested? Because all these phases are, I told you, one of the characteristics of self-assembly is their spontaneous change formation as well as dynamic in nature. That is, it changes its properties when you apply it to external stimuli. These liquid crystalline molecules can respond to electric field and you get display applications. You apply temperature change, you get thermal sensor. You apply pressure, the phase characteristics will change, you get thermal pressure sensors. Magnetic field sensor or light, it can respond to the light, you get display devices working on light energy. Now let me go to one simple example. Okay. I want to tell you the basic about how a calculator, you should know, at least we are trying a display device, you should know at least how does a calculator work, how liquid crystal molecule is working inside the calculator. See, look at this. This is your 7-segment display, right? Right? You see always in calculators, in your watches and all this things, what you see is this structure. Now what is happening here? You look at this structure. Here you have full dark place and here you see the light is passing through this glass, then you get this letter E. But here if everything is made dark, you get this letter A. So basically what you are doing, you are controlling the passage of light through the cell. Cell in the sense simply through glass plates. And you are marked it here. Somehow you are blocking the light to pass in this case, and here it is allowed to pass through. And based on controlling this, you can generate any of the numerical numbers that you need. Right? Now let us see how it is done. You take two glass plates. Take two glass plates. See here. And these glass plates are oriented. Now say for example, these are liquid crystalline molecule. These are two glass plates. Now the glass plates are aligned or rubbed for a direction, so that molecules are in this glass plate. You see, the molecules are organized in this direction. And here it is actually opposite. You see, the alignment is in opposite fashion. See, the line was here, but this line is crossed. So the molecules are allowed to align. In between there is a twist in the phase because of surface anchoring properties. This surface will force the molecules to align in this fashion. In the top it will align in this opposite fashion. Finally that will drive one molecule to the other. Supramolecular self-assembly is driven by a twisted limmatic. The limmatic phase will appear as a twisted phase within that glass. Now let us see, once you have a twisted limmatic cell, what you can do? Say for example here. Now you are allowing the light to pass through. These two are crossed polarizers. Okay? The crossed polarizers. What does a crossed polarizer do? So you don't have any liquid crystalline material. The light is allowed to pass. This is a polarizer. Polarizer will allow the light to pass through only one direction. It is in this direction. Based on the polarizing direction, the light is entering like this. Here you have a crossed polarizer. You see, light is like this. So suppose you don't have any material here. You allow the light to pass. All lights in this direction will enter, but it cannot pass through because it's in the opposite crossed polarizer. Light will be blocked there. It's not allowed to pass through because these are crossed polarizers. Now we put the liquid crystalline sample. Liquid crystalline sample is actually a waveguide. That is nothing but it can guide the light entering into the system and rotate the phase of that light and allow some part of the light to pass through the crossed polarizer. That means you shine light from here, some part of the light is out. So that is a bright session. Bright. The pixel will appear as bright. Here you see this bright part, because you apply light, everything is going through. If here light is passed through, there is no light is blocked, so it is actually appearing as a bright session. Now these materials are sensitive to the electric field. Apply the electric field. Liquid crystal molecules will reorient to the applied electric field. Now you see all the liquid crystal molecules are orienting, aligned along with the electric field. What happened? The wave guiding nature is lost. So what happened? Earlier it was allowing the light to pass through, but here because there is when in the presence of the electric field, it is no longer acting as a waveguide. So the light is not allowed to pass through and you appear as a dark. Right? Now you apply the 7 segments. Each segment is applied differently to the electric field. Each button you press, at that particular area electric field is applied and you don't see light passing through that segment. They are interconnected. So that is how you generate these different display or dark and bright field. Basically what you are doing, you are taking a twisted limmatic material and acting as a light on-off shutter. The wave guiding nature of the liquid crystalline material is used for controlling the light output. So that's how you control the display application or the display nature of this material. The simplest display I am talking about. You add the color filters to this, you get color displays, and that is what is used in your laptops and other advanced display materials. Now let me talk something that I have done in research. In this previous case you have seen this light on-off way. Now you don't switch off the calculator, or actually the surface anchoring will allow the material to reorganize it to the old way. But there is a time lag. Forward is by electric field application, switch off is by surface anchoring. That's what the simple calculator works. Now you try some materials which can both work on and off, is controlled by your power device. A power supply. On stage and off stage is controlled by the power supply or the electric field. That is called a dual frequency device, wherein you can change the twisted phase as well as the opposite nature by controlling by electric field. Two different frequencies you apply, the orientation will change depending on the frequency. For that you need different materials. This was the work that I started in CNCR where I did my PhD. We try to get different materials. For this we need a special characteristic molecules where it can respond to the dual frequencies. To one frequency it will align in one way, in another frequency when you apply it will orient in another fashion. So the challenge is you have to design some molecules which show this property. This is only a single frequency molecule, you need different types of molecules and combinations to get this dual frequency material. That's the challenge. How you increase? You try putting the dipole at this stage, we introduce different polar substituents. That's how we modify the structure of the molecules to get these complex structures. Okay. Now, continuing on the same field, in US doing my postdoctoral research, I was doing again on the phase, but this phase is called not pneumatic but biaxial pneumatic. Biaxial pneumatic, in the simple molecule, it is a rod-shaped molecule or a cylinder where the switching is between your long axis and the short axis, I mean your length and height, length and width. So you are allowing the molecule assembled like this, you are orienting with the electric field in this fashion. But now you design a material where there are 3 dimensions can be used. Not only switching this direction. So here it takes a long time. See, this molecule is like this, it has to come all the way in. And realignment, it takes much time. In a biaxial pneumatic phase, you are offered an additional axis like this. The short axis, see, this switching itself is enough to get the light as an on-off shutter. Instead of going this long rotation, you can have a molecule like this and then like this. This short axis rotation, that display will be much faster. That phase is called biaxial pneumatic phase. It can actually revolutionize the industry that was world of display, but unfortunately we don't have any phase which is showing this pneumatic phase in pure compounds. In polymers, of course, we have got, but we don't have in small molecules. This phase has not been discovered yet. It's going on, the research is going on to design some molecules. People have identified different molecules and self-assembling those molecules into different structures so that you can get a orientation with the board shape as well, a biaxial pneumatic in the straight phase. That research is still going on. Some of my publications associated with such biaxial pneumatic phases or the molecular designs are here, but to be very frank, we have not got some biaxial pneumatic phase yet, and still my project is also on that with the DST, where currently one of my students is working in this project to find out the elusive materials. The only thing, you have to design the molecule so that you can get that corresponding materials. We have some ideas, but we have to materialize it and then study and see whether that phase is showing or not. So that research is going on in this area. Now let me come to another area where light controlled switching or molecular switching. There what you do, now we are saying the liquid crystal materials can be switched to the with using the electric field. Can you use light as a switching or a stimuli so that you can change the self-assembly? See, look at this. What is this molecule? What is this molecule? Azobenzene. Azobenzene. This will undergo cis-trans isomerization. You shine with one frequency of the wavelength of the light, it will go to cis, come back, it will go to trans. There is a switching. This switching will give you a change in the molecular length using 9 angstrom to about 5.5 angstrom. There is a bending and opening by responding to light. That much of movement is enough to disturb a self-assembled structures. See, look at this. You have a pneumatic phase. You dome this material, azobenzene, little bit, some impurity. Now you allow the shining of the light. This will disrupt the media. The cis-trans isomerization of this one molecule can disrupt the molecules surrounding it. So that what will happen? You are switching between pneumatic phase and an isotropic phase. Earlier we got this isotropic phase by heating, by changing temperature. Now you are keeping the temperature constant, but you are doing that phase transition by use of light as a stimuli. Extend this further. This is nothing but a chiral pneumatic phase where you are seeing the temperature sensor we have discussed. So here this is a phase called chiral pneumatic where you have a pneumatic phase coming out of chiral molecules. Each layer is pneumatic that is twisted to form a helical structure, and that helix has a property, the light entering into the helix. Helix has a property. What is the property of helix? Helix is always characterized by the handedness, either left-handed or right-handed. So a helix with a pitch that is matching to the frequency of the light entering or wavelength of the light entering, 50% of the light that is matching with the helicity will actually reflect it back. That is nothing but selective reflection is possible from a chiral pneumatic phase. That is the simple reason why you are seeing that temperature sensor or mood sensor or the lipstick that we have talked about. Okay, there the material is changing its pitch depending on the temperature. Once the pitch will change, the light that is reflected, of course the visible light contains all the wavelengths, right? 400 to 800 nanometer, all different light. Only certain frequency or the wavelength that is matching with the pitch of the photoelectric material is allowed to reflect, and that is the color you see. Now, depending on changing the temperature, what will happen? Molecules will expand, contract, and that's how increasing the pitch and decreasing the pitch, and thereby the wavelength will vary and the reflected light will vary. This is the wave. So this is again a temperature controlled sensor, and that is what you use in temperature sensor. Now you use this as a changing the pitch using the photoresponsive molecule. Say for example, this one. You have a nematic phase. You are doping it with a dopant which is chiral. So density is induced. You get a chiral nematic phase. This is by self-assembly. Chirality transfer by self-assembly. You have a chiral molecule inducing the pitch. Now you see, not only that this pitch is, or these molecules are also photoresponsive. You irradiate with light. This is changing and the pitch is changing. So these are nothing but the molecule that you induce is not just photoactive material, that is also a chiral molecule. So it is a chirooptic switch that you have added into the system, and that is changing, controlling the system now. Now let us look what are the advantages of this light, this application. Okay, now here you have a system, you take the nematic phase, add a photoresponsive chiral compound. Because it is chiral, it will generate a photoelectric phase. Now you use the light to switch this chirality, and then you get this controlled color change with the light radiation. So that is nothing but you can generate a light display, light driven display, rather than the temperature controlled display, light driven display. Say for example, I worked on this project in US and Japan. This is a chiral molecule. Why this is chiral? Usually chirality, how do you recognize chirality? A carbon with the 4 different substances, as we are all by heart we know. But is there any chiral carbon here? You don't have a chiral carbon. So there are different chirality. Again, you have another chiral element, that is what? Axially chiral compounds, axial chirality. That's like your biphenyls. Okay, that's axially chiral compound. Your biphenyl, atropisomerism. All these are axial chirality. Again, there is one more chiral element, that's planar chirality. Have you heard about it? Planar chiral compound. There is a chiral plane in the molecule. Simply, this is a planar chiral compound. Now, this molecule is chiral, that has a photoresponsive molecule. Why this is chiral? Because the space here is blocking. Because see here, this is like a skipping. You can. This is a swing. This cannot cross over that biphenyl. This azobenzene group, it cannot cross over here. Because why? It is blocked. But now you increase the space in between this, then it can freely rotate. This phenyl ring can freely rotate inside or can cross over. This can cross over this biphenyl ring like this. So you control the motion of the molecule, or something like a molecular brake, wherein with irradiation it will have a property, without irradiation it will have another property. So that's not a chirooptic switch. You are controlling the properties of a chiral molecule using light as a stimulant. This is the work that I have done in US and Japan, and we have also patented this molecule. Now I want to tell you about some simple synthesis here. See, this is a very simple molecule. You control the spacer length. This is something different from this. You can change the spacer length. We have done different spacers here. And finally we found that this molecule is a planar chiral molecule. Cannot cross over. Synthesis is very simple. You take this, tosylate it, then Williamson ether synthesis, reductive coupling using lithium aluminum hydride, you get that molecule. Now the idea, you want to know whether this molecule is chiral or not. That is the first task. How do you know? Characterize it using NMR. NMR, can you differentiate enantiomers in a simple NMR spectra, using NMR spectra? No, we cannot. But you can distinguish actually diastereomers. Diastereotopic hydrogen, homotopic hydrogen, enantiotopic hydrogen. So all heard about this? I'm sure you heard. So here you can see these hydrogens are actually diastereotopic. Diastereotopic hydrogens are here. This one HEA here on this molecule also. So those diastereotopic hydrogens, the moment you took the NMR spectra we got, otherwise you would have got this only 4 hydrogens and 4 hydrogens. Where is it 4 hydrogens? 2 hydrogens from here, 2 hydrogens. So you get that 4 plus 4, 8. 4 and 4 here, 8 hydrogens, but here. But instead one set of hydrogens is appearing as one group, but other you see there is a split. That indicates there is a diastereotopic hydrogens that are appearing. So that diastereotopic hydrogens itself indicated that our molecule is chiral. But how do you characterize chiral compound? What is the spectroscopic technique exclusively that you can use? Not UV visible anyway. Which one do you use? Yeah, it is the CD spectroscopy, circular dichroism spectroscopy technique that you can use. Before that we wanted to know our molecule is responding to light. See, simply apply UV visible light, you can see change in the UV visible spectrum. This is the UV visible spectrum of this compound. Now you have a enhanced, we did not do any chiral synthesis. So that means what we obtained is a racemic mixture. We have to separate these racemic mixtures. How do we separate two chiral enantiomers? Enantiomers can be separated using chiral form. One of them is the resolution of enantiomers. Resolution of racemic mixture by chiral phonochromatography. This is a chiral phonochromatography displaying both enantiomers A and B. Now, after separation on HPLC, we got two enantiomers separately. I talk enantiomer A as the first eluted enantiomer, enantiomer B as the second eluted enantiomer. So I got reasonably above 99% enantiomeric purity. We separated two enantiomers. Now the question is, take the CD of each spectrum. This is enantiomers A and B giving opposite mirror images CD spectrum. That is a circular dichroism spectroscopy. I am sure you will be studying that in your MSc classes. So you get for enantiomers opposite mirror image CD spectra indicating for both enantiomers. So CD spectra is used to analyze this compound. Of course, we got both mirror image. These are nothing but your Cotton effect. You are familiar with that also, I think. Cotton effect, ORD, optical rotatory dispersion, and the Cotton effect. Anomalous ORD curves are called Cotton effect curves. So you are familiar with that. Even that Cotton effect curves can be used to characterize enantiomers. And let us go further. This is nothing but, now we have, this is a one enantiomer, and undergoing radiation you have different in their changes in behavior, there is a switching. What does it indicate? Your chirality of one enantiomer can be switched with light irradiation. That's about how powerful a chiral that material is, can be also controlled by the photo irradiation. That is why you see a change in the absorption pattern. Some Cotton effect curves are also missing with irradiation. So basically this proves that the molecule that you have synthesized is actually a chiral molecule, a photoresponsive molecule, and a chiroptic molecule. Meaning the chirality of that molecule can also be controlled by light irradiation. So this is a functional molecule. This does not become a functional material. This is a functional molecule which can control some functions in a self-assembled system. I wanted to, okay, this is UV visible spectra. And another interestingly, this molecule is very robust. With the photo irradiation, this molecule, once you separate enantiomer A and B, by photo irradiation it is not racemizing. That is also important. That is not racemizing with the photo irradiation, because you can see enantiomer S enantiomer going only to S cis and S trans. S trans and S cis, but not crossing over by irradiation to the R enantiomer. R is undergoing switching within R. The configuration is retained. So it is a robust chiroptic switch. I want to tell you something about the quantum chemistry here. Are you studying computational chemistry? Computational chemistry, applications of computational chemistry, because you always think computational chemistry is exclusively for those quantum mechanics people. But very good, I had a very good lecture, but you are unfortunate. You don't have his classes. Also meetings used to take quantum mechanics class. Now here, I just tell you, this is an application part of it. Now you have enantiomers A and B, but I don't know which enantiomer is R and which enantiomer is S. How do you assign the absolute configuration to a particular enantiomer? R and S naming and all you know. The best way is you take the crystal structure and analyze. But unfortunately, I could not get the crystal structures of this molecule. Other ways depend on the computational technique. What I did, I optimized the structure of S enantiomer. This is drawn by me. We can put it into a structure. We decided that this is a S enantiomer. Finally, I took the ground energy minimized the structures of this in a DFT calculation. That is using the Gaussian technique at this level. We optimized. We got two ground state structures. Now, quantum mechanically or using the computational software, we can generate the electronic spectra of materials, the UV spectra and the CD spectra. Simply what we did, we took these two. These are the two ground states of this molecule that need to be considered. Using this and the Boltzmann average spectra, because at the room temperature you have these both the enantiomers with a very low energy. You have to consider a population of this relatively, how much percentage of these are there. Using those percentage relation, you generate the UV spectra. And this is the peaks that you are getting from computation, that red one. And the other one is your original spectra recorded for the sample. This simply tells you that our computation technique is matching with the experimental UV spectra. Now you extrapolate this and generate a CD spectra for the compound that you have computationally calculated for the S isomer. Simply we took the CD spectra of that compound. These are the two structures. For both we got and we took the Boltzmann average spectra. Remember Boltzmann distribution, Boltzmann structures? Maybe some of my professors will be laughing at me because I never knew anything about physical chemistry. When I was here, I never bothered to study that, but I had a tough time going back and studying all these things. The irony is one of the faculty members, I was so weak in physical chemistry, asked me, did you pass chemistry? I was surprised to see that you are walking here with a degree in chemistry. That was a state and liking of my subject of physical chemistry, but later on I had to study a lot of physical chemistry. I regret not doing that when I was in the class. But here you can see that, now here this is important, this is our spectra. These lines are the computationally simulated CD spectra of the S enantiomer. Now we compared one of the enantiomers with the experimental spectra in green. What you see is the experimental spectra that we obtained. And which was that enantiomer? That enantiomer was the first enantiomer, enantiomer B. Second enantiomer that exactly matches it. See, this is the experimental spectra, this is the simulated spectra. So the enantiomer B is having an absolute configuration. So computational chemistry can be used to determine or assign the absolute configuration of this molecule. Again a simple chemistry. Now let me rush through because my time is running up, going off. This was our basic idea. We generated a chiral photochromic switch. Now we want to put it into a chiral nematic, a nematic phase, make it a chiral nematic, use light as a radiation and generate the display out of that material. This is how you get the selective reflection spectra when you dope into a chiral system. I will tell you here. Okay, this is the one. This is actually two simple glass slides. Botany people we use now, that microscope slides, simple two slides, our mixture, a nematic phase with our chiral material. In a simple way you can see this glass sheet is showing different reflection colors. Simply shine light from there and then you get these reflected colors. So you don't have any electronic circuit, simply take that sample, put it in a cover slip, put sample, put another cover slip. You have one color. You irradiate some light, you get another color. Depending on the intensity of the light irradiation, you are changing the photoactivity of the photochromic molecule, and that photochromic molecule is controlling the supramolecular self-assembly of molecule, and you get different color. AIST is the institute where I work, Advanced Industrial Science and Technology in Japan. This is the tune that we generated again on a single two glass sheet. We don't have any circuit. You radiate different parts of the molecule with a different intensity of the light. You can display any image. So this will partially solve your problem. See, you have mobile phones. You hold it against your sunlight. What will happen? You cannot read, right? You cannot see. Why? Because that is not working on a reflective mode. Suppose you have a display that is working on a reflective mode. You hold against the bright light. Your display will become much sharper. Because here the light is coming from behind. So that is the difference in this materials. So we could generate that, and this is, I think time is up. So discording molecules arranging so that pi-pi interactions are used for simple molecule to generate this structure. This is a molecular wire, electrons can be pumped in, and you have a discording molecules of the crystalline phase that is used for generating this kind of different stuff like solar cells, oil lilies, and organic light emitting diodes. So I just hope I am not going into the basics of this. Here, this is a part of the work where it generated the organic photoconductor, the photovoltaic cell, where we use porphyrin materials as the light acceptor, and then use the acceptor molecules as fullerenes. So you generate a photovoltaic device where it can capture the sunlight and transfer it as the energy. The output of this was only less than 3%. So it's not a commercializable solar cell, but still it works on the principles of self-assembly. You are generating these complex structures using your self-assembled structures. Okay, so crowning will probably I'll stop it. Because these are some other crown ethers. Supramolecular chemistry is used in catenanes, protaxanes. You are familiar, changing this molecule based on oxidation reduction potential. Again, there is no covalent bonding involved. It's only by changing oxidation reduction of the self-assembled non-covalent interactions that are using for driving these materials. Your dendrimers, different applications. It's acting as again a nano reactor, wherein the reactions can be controlled here. You have nanocar, not the Tata's nanocar, chemist nanocar. The molecules are driven here, the chiral element, this is undergoing photoswitching. That chassis is rotating, it will take away this carborane on a surface, it can move. Actually, you have papers demonstrating that physical movement. By light irradiation, you are driving that molecule like a nano motor, doing some functions or movements. A directional motion, very important. Molecular scissor, irradiate light, you have a ferrocene molecule at the pivot, here you have irradiation, the blade will open and close. You can pick some molecule from the solution, another irradiation you will release somewhere else. So this kind of activities can be done. Support molecular switches or molecular devices. So you are familiar with these things now, right? Self-assembly, how self-assembly work. So what is self-assembly? Then we conclude. Yeah, the spontaneous organization of molecules into complex structure. This we have already told. Liquid crystals you know. So you are familiar, and what are the questions I need to give to Madam? Yeah, what are liquid crystals? All these things I can give, right? Okay, fine. Thank you very much for the patient hearing, bearing me for almost 1.5 hours. Thank you.
We all have enjoyed, and on behalf of KSTA and on behalf of the Department of Chemistry, Mangalore University, I would like to present a memento to Manoj Matthews.